Namaskar, bhaiya bhainon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I bring to you another episode, this time, which is very different from what I normally do. It's a topic in which I don't specialize. It's a topic that came to me because of, thanks to Justice Chandrachud, who mixed up the issue of sexuality and gender, which brought this issue alive to me. Also, the noise around this issue has actually created a different kind of issue. That is the LGBT lesbian, gay, and bisexual people who had been fighting for the rights for a long time and feminists have been overtaken by the queer movement, by the LGBTIQ plus etc. movement, and actually hurt their own rights for which they've been fighting for a long time. That is the reason I have touched upon this topic. I claim no specialization, but with me I have two very eminent activists, Ankit Bhuptani, the young of the lot, a proclaimed gay and gay rights activist. We have Abhijit, openly gay. We know him very well, so I will not need to introduce him to you. Now, what brings me to this particular topic is that it is the start of this controversy by Justice Chandrachud, and actually I thank him for that. The reason I also touch upon this is that this particular aspect of LGBTIQ, etc., and other issues related to queer movement actually arise out of the same new left, which is the morphing of Marxism into new left and then morphing into wokeism, which has taken the world by storm. Now, the three main theories which have been the product of wokeism. One is the critical race theory, extended to critical caste theory, extended to caste is equal to race and casteism equal to racism, thus absolving the white racist of any guilt and putting it onto the Hindus for their casteism. Other is the queer theory, which has tried to subdue the actual victims or actual people, LGB, who are actually fighting for the rights for a long time, and the intersectional feminism, which tries to take over the entire feminist movement by giving different hues and colors. I'm not going to get into very technical discussions, but I will just point out some more issues that come up with this particular issue. I will give you some news. For example, there was a Canadian father who was jailed for calling his daughter as her or she, while she identified herself as he. We have male sportsperson who have entered the sports arena because they believe they are women and they have won the championships, taking away the rights of women for which they fought a long time to have their own sports activity. There are transgender males advertising aggressively for female fashion products, cosmetic products, and there are gender neutral toilets which invade the privacy of women for which they fought for many years. I read somewhere that until 1860, women in Britain were not going out because there were no toilets available. And of course, there is the rights of children and women, and pedophilia has been normalized as being differently sexually oriented. All this raises a question why feminists are silent. Where is the voice of LGB, who are actually the sufferers of the social ostracization for a long time? And to just give you one more idea how this industry works, the children can get their sex change at the age of 15 without parental consent, though they cannot drink till they're 21st, they cannot marry till they're 25. And the sex change operations in USA today in 1921-22 was $2.1 billion. In 2023, it is projected to be $5 billion. 25% of transgenders have undergone sex change operation, which sometimes because of children turns into genital mutilation also. And 10% of the US population today identify itself as transgender. With all these social issues that we look around it, I open the discussion with Abhijit. How does he look at this issue, which I've just pointed out? I have just pointed out what is apparently open, but we don't read about it. There is also a lot of exploitation of children also. And as I talked about, the rights of real sufferers are being actually overstepped by these people. So how do you look at it as one of the people who has been very open about all these issues? Yeah, Vijit.
Should I go first? Okay.
Yeah.
So, sir, my thing is, there are women's rights,
there are LGB rights, and there are trans rights. Each one of them is a separate category because the origin of each is very, very different. The solution to each is very, very different. With men and women, the only difference, realistically, other than the physiognomical differences, is the fact that men are physically stronger. So in a pre-industrial age, it was the man would naturally dominate. But with industrialization, which is the application of chemical energy to the production process, like, a man picking up 20 kilos is easier than a woman picking up 20 kilos. But when both man or woman are using a forklift where you just have to press a button and use a lever to lift up those 20 odd kilos, it equalizes the man and the woman. So this kind of brought about the sort of equality which is still being realized in a country like India, which hasn't fully industrialized. We still haven't even gotten to that stage of full women's liberation. Number two is the LGB part of this. Now, LGB part of this is that, there are men who are naturally attracted to men, women naturally attracted to women, and some attracted to both. This is a completely different set. It was considered quite normal for most of history, including in Europe. Then it became sort of criminalized over a period of time. Our own laws go back to this colonial period. In the West, there has been virulent homophobia because, as mandated in the Bible and the Quran, you have to kill, and the Torah, you have to kill somebody who engages in a homosexual whatever. In India and in the East generally, the Buddhist East or Hindu India, this has never been the case. In pre-monotheist, in the pre-monotheist Middle East or the pre-monotheist Europe, this wasn't the case because it was just accepted as a natural state of things. Do whatever you want. The third, the trans rights are the most problematic because they are the most heavily discriminated against community in India. They've gone from a place where they were treated as, something sacred. Agar bacha ghar mein paida hota tha, you had to bring a trans person to bless the child. If there was a marriage, there had to be a trans person who would come and bless the marriage and things like that. From there, we've transitioned to a place where, the sexual, at least with an LGBTQ person, with an LGB person, they have a normal childhood up to the point they have their sexual realization. Sure, there's teasing that, oh, you're an effeminate boy, or you're a butch girl, or something like that. But that's nothing compared to what a trans person goes through, because the moment the trans person is born, you can see sexual dysmorphia in the genitals at the time of birth itself. And many families just give up their kids, abandon their kids, and things like that if they're born trans. The trans trauma is a significantly greater trauma than all the rest of it combined. Each of these require three different sets of ideas and solutions. You just can't combine all of them. And this is particularly the thing where intersectionality goes completely bust as an idea, because you cannot have an LGB person screaming free Kashmir and free Palestine, two states that will literally throw off LGB people off their roofs if they go in the theological ways that they're meant to be going or they want to be going. So, it's literally like putting a concentration camp guard and a Jew together, saying this is intersectional and you fight for your rights.
True. I think it's a very good introduction to the entire issue, because you have put everything very objectively. And I think most of the people don't even understand the issue of transgender, though for India it's very common. In fact, there is a wonderful YouTube by Sampadana Mishra just yesterday about the Indian understanding of transgenders and bisexual and other kind of various sexual deviations based on Vedic, Puranic, and Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc. And so I think this you have put this topic in a very right perspective. Ankit, as a person who is openly gay and who has been sometimes criticized by the LGBTQI wokeism for being talking about Indian perspective of this issue. What is your view of what is happening these days outside, and also whether this is creeping into India which will actually hurt the LGBT rights and transgender rights. Your mic is off here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. First of all, um, let's understand one thing very basically, that who is trans and who is non-trans. Okay, now if I'm born as a male with male genitals and I consider myself to be male, then I am called as a cisgender male. Wherein if a person is born as a female whose biological sex is female and considers herself to be female, that person is a biological cisgender female. 99% of the people around us in our society are cisgender, irrespective of they're homosexual or not. Now, what happens is that we, as a gay man, are also cisgender male. Matlab ki I was born as male, I consider myself to be male. So we do not go through a lot of discrimination and trauma as much as somebody who consider their gender identity to be different than what they were born with. And that is where the trans as a conversation and a concept comes in, wherein trans people are the one who says that irrespective of my gender identity, I do not identify with that and I identify with something else. The problem comes when you have this so many types and like different shades of what that something else could be. And that is what honorable Supreme Court has been noticing recently. And unfortunately, we need to understand one thing very clearly, that look, we live in a society wherein right now even this basic conversation and understanding of LGBT itself is not very clear. And in that situation, you want to add 108 another genders, you want to add another layers of, and then you tell that please accept us. See, the societal change and a societal movement is a slow process. It has to be step by step process. We decriminalized homosexuality in 2018, which was quite late, but it is yet very recent, right? Now we are talking about marriage equality. Let's see what happens in the court about it. On top of it, now, when you recognize this diversity of gender identities within your law, it becomes much more complicated conversation. Not even a single Western country right now recognizes all this type of genders. Like what is like twin gender or a pure gender. Pure gender is somebody who is today right now I don't know what, but my friend sitting next to me is identifying as a male. I will also identify myself as a male, right? So that is pure gender. तो ये सब जो है ना, it is very hodgepodge, it's very complex. I'm not saying it's wrong or right, I do not know, but all I'm saying is when we talk about policy, when we talk about law, when we talk about marriage and the legal aspect following that in a society like India, it will be much more complex. And that's why we cannot right now make everything possible in one day. It's a slow journey. All my request right now to my community would be that let's recognize this trans community, as Abhijit rightly put before me, that has gone through a lot of trauma, a lot of challenges than we gay men or lesbian women, although we also go through quite a lot of discrimination and bullying when we are in school age. Let's recognize our rights under the constitution without talking about so much of gender diversity and gender identities as this stage right now. Let it be cisgender, trans, and some shades of trans community, but not all those 46 or 108 genders, is what my starting comments could be.
In a way, you are trying to avoid the issue whether this particular 108 kinds of genders and which can keep on adding, and some of which are actually not even understandable. I believe that actually what we at one time considered to be our mood of the day, that I am feeling rather childish today, that I am feeling rather somber today, or I am feeling feminist, feminine today, I am in a very emotional mood, etc. We have a concept of Ardhanarishwar. Now, caring to the extent that what is supposed to be your mood becomes your sex, your gender, sorry. So when you have the strange behavior of people in the society, is it genuine deviation, or is it just a distortion of the idea of LGBT and also this idea of fluid gender, which leads to this kind of forced behavior because there's trend around in fashion industry or in film industry, or those people who want to be famous, and where the crimes like pedophilia are being normalized or child or animal sex is normalized. I don't think this is something that you need to shirk the idea or keep away from the idea because it might get controversial, because we as a dharmic nation have very clear idea about these issues, and by inventing such such divisions or strange intersectionality, as Abhijit put it, are we trying to avoid because there is going to be chaos, just like feminists are keeping quiet, although their rights are being taken over by the supposedly transgenders who claim to be men or the women, though they are not, just by testosterone levels. So, are you trying to avoid this issue? Are you saying that these are genuine differences of gender, or is it just avoiding the issue for the timing, Abhijit?
See, I think this is my whole problem with this argument. Pedophilia is a crime,
Yes.
but using this sort of confusion, Ankit referred to confusion. They are deliberately creating confusion, uh, uh,
Yes.
deliberately, in order to normalize these crimes, right? uh, uh, a man going into a woman's toilet essentially to molest a woman. What happened in that Scotland prison, which is why Nicola Sturgeon lost her prime ministership, or whatever it's called, premiership of Scotland, is exactly this. You have a whole bunch of loser men who are identifying as women precisely to win medals, to win sponsorship. They've created a whole extortion system around them in order to get funding for all of this. And remember, wokeism itself started with that movement called the Soixante, the 66 perverts of Paris. 66 known child molesters, including Jean-Paul, was it Jean-Paul Sartre, or was it Gide? I forget who. But known perverts who ran off to America to avoid prosecution, who were cracked down upon very badly in France, but celebrated abroad because nobody actually knew what they were talking about. They masked it in all kinds of, gobbledygook, highly complex gobbledygook. So we have to understand that, spreading this confusion is part of the plan. This is why they'll say, define a man. I don't know how to define a man. I personally know exactly how to define a man. I personally know exactly how to define a woman. And Indian law, the transgender bill that was passed, I think in 2019 or 2020, has done a fantastic job in identifying a trans. But these people will not, because they want to change and get the rights of everybody else that they want to. Do you remember this lady called Rachel Dolezal, who was a white
Yes.
woman who actually became the president of some black association because she used to tan herself and dye her hair and things like that? Basically, what this is trying to destroy all the gains of the liberation that has happened over the last few years, to create societal. This is how communism and socialism work. They identify victims, they create victimhood narratives, they then bring together a rainbow coalition of victimhood. They create anger, they create fury, they create extortion networks, they create the literature to justify all of this nonsense, and most of it is overwhelmingly gobbledygook. And that is how they execute systemic capture. They already have done it in America with a large part of this DEI recognition. Remember, it was Pfizer's DEI officer who recommended Anthony Fauci for the Fulbright, no, sorry, for the Pulitzer or the Fulbright, I forget what it was, award, which he's won. I mean, this is one of those circles where aap mera peet khujli karo, main aapka peet khujli karunga. That's what it is.
True.
So I think we're actually, the very fact that we're actually debating this as some kind of a sane narrative that needs to be countered sanely, when in fact what they have done is mainstreamed mental disease.
Exactly.
They have callously and very sickly exploited mental vulnerabilities in people in the most disgusting way humanly possible.
I read recently about, I don't know exact truth of this. Bill Gates Foundation had supported a particular organization which wanted to sensitize 10-year-old children about sex workers. and we know there are classes of sensitization of children about gender. So if that is so, then are we creating a kind of, monstrosity where children get into depression, they get confused, because I was reading somewhere that majority of children who have gone into depression, the teenage people, are those who consider themselves progressive. One is what you call a mischief of these people trying to sell their perversion as some kind of ideology. Other is the effect of it on the society. If people like these kind of foundations supports the activity, is it, as you rightly pointed, is to create chaos and mayhem in the society, where majority of the people get confused about their own personality, ending up in mental asylums or with psychiatrists, and surgeons or pharma industry making money. I think Ankit has avoided the question with this explanation that Abhijit has given. Would Ankit like to relook at what he has said about this, various kind of sexual orientations and hazar kind of, genders being identified every day, a new gender comes up, some of which is actually ridiculous, if not grotesque.
Yeah,
Yes,
sir. So
Ankit.
my yeah, sir. So my understanding is very clear that gender is not binary to start with. There are more than two genders in the
No,
world. How many I
please,
do not
no,
know.
that we agree.
Yeah,
But you believe that there
but
can be what I term as mood can become a gender for the
of
day?
course not. Of course not. Like pure gender, gender for the mood, and so on and so forth. I do not think so. There is some kind of reality reflection of human experience in that. It is. Uh, these are the Western imposed, and these are also not coming from a living reality of queer people, but it is coming from a Western elite classrooms wherein they have created this verbiage, they have created these terminologies, and then start using that in international documents and start using that in the various forums, and then it comes picked up by the media, comes to you, and then we here in Asia start accepting those terminologies. So we need to have a real understanding that what is real for India and what is not real for India. And why this happens
Well,
is,
for
in my
example,
experience.
Ankit,
Yeah.
just a moment. For example, NCRT in its book has called for gender neutral toilets. Already Nalsar University has it. So it is already entered India, including the ministry, where the people who wrote the policy document talk about this common toilet even in schools. So it is no more just something distant Western elite.
Right. Right. So we need to be
Yeah.
very
So
mindful
carry
of
on.
what we allow and what will not allow in our society. Like for a gender neutral toilet, for an example, as you have pointed out towards. Now, I understand that it can be misused, but also at the same time, if I'm a trans person, which toilet will I be using? Now, will you have three different toilets? One is for male, another for female, and third one for the trans? Or would you allow trans person to use the gender toilet which they prefer to? Or will you have a gender neutral toilet? So these are the conversation needs to be addressed when we counter the gender neutral toilet, that how many toilets will you have for how many genders. That is on the side of the gender neutral toilet. But however, the point I wanted to raise here, sir, is that look, the whole LGBT movement globally is dominated by left. Now the challenge is when this their left dominated LGBT movement comes to India, in there it's very clear. If you are a queer rights activist, you are against church. It's as simple as that in traditional sense. But when this movement comes to India, we are not here condemning homosexuality. We are not saying ki I should be stoned to death, just like in the West, some of the Abrahamic countries in Abrahamic religion, right? So then it becomes challenge that here queer movement cannot be against the religion and the cultural ethos of it, because there's quite a lot of space, quite a lot of accommodation towards the diverse LGBT identities. And that is when you will find in lot of queer movement in India, they find intersectionality with other movements. So I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, I don't know if you remember this, sir, in Mumbai Pride, we had this sedition case, and the case is still going on, and because of that we are not able to have Mumbai LGBT Pride after pandemic as well, in which this person identify themselves as trans, raises slogan in the support of Sharjil Imam. Now, what Sharjil Imam, who is asking for quote unquote breaking India apart, has anything to do with LGBT rights movement? What
Exactly.
Kashmir
Now
and
here
Palestine has
here you
to
come
do?
to
the LGBT
Ankit,
right
here you come
movement.
to the crux. Here you come to the crux of what Abhijit pointed out, that this is insidious attempt to break the society by bringing in very diverse issues. And though they look diverse, actually they are coming from the same stream of idea to break the society. So what they have to do is that is exactly, you should understand, actually that is what they want. They are what they did, what they show as separate ideas actually coming from the same stream of Marxism or New Left, and that is the entire idea of this. All these movements ultimately is to break the society into smaller oppressed people, because oppressors can't talk. So I can't criticize you because I am an oppressor as a community, and nor can Abhijit, speak against you because he may be oppressor in your case. So this entire game plan of breaking the society using various means, because they come from the same upstream, spring is same, stream may look different. So that is where I think you made a mistake by saying that what Sergio wants to do. They very clearly showed what they wanted to do actually. So
Sir,
that is
also
why this
breaking
particular
society
discussion.
apart, I feel breaking a society apart, you are giving them too much of bow. Actually, they all are looking for money. They are looking for free conference calls, for five-star
Exactly.
stays, and business class tickets. This whole idea that they want to break India apart and all that, it may be a side objective. Their core objective is just money. Let me tell you, sir, if you start speaking against India and you start start victimizing your identity and start talking about it, you get a lot of calls, lot of conference calls and money to speak on these all global conferences and platforms, which I do not get, because I have already decided that for me the nation comes first, my cultural identity comes first, after that my sexuality. So they are really like expecting them to have a this longer vision of breaking India apart. It's just giving too much of bow to them. Most of these are kids who are 19, 20, 21, 22, studying in TISS in Mumbai or JNU in Delhi, first year student, 12th standard pass students. They really don't have such a long expectations. ज्यादा से ज्यादा इंस्टाग्राम पे फॉलोवर बढ़ा देने हैं, मैं थोड़ी कूल दिख जाऊंगी, मीडिया विल कवर मी. For an example, recently you happen to would have discovered that India Today cover, right? When the community celebrate that picture as activism, I'm questioning what a full-grown hairy man in a bright clothes is projected as a queer rights activist.
Who
And that is how
incidentally has a history of making pedophilic comments,
Yeah.
objectifying and sexualizing children.
Yeah,
And
see,
just to
I,
add, Ratanji, just to
just
add to
one
what
point before Abhijit you come. Actually, that what you call as very small minority is not true anymore. I talked to a young boy from Hyderabad who is studying in Gandhinagar, engineering college. He says majority of his friends have become woke. When you say woke, they are also without understanding supporting LGBTIQ plus plus whatever, and they also try to get into that particular thinking mode. In SU, head of the department told me that girls come to her asking for whether they can go for sex change. There is no more a minor small group. With that comment, I'll hand over to Abhijit. Yeah, Abhijit.
we need to accept, that a lot of this need for sex change actually directly comes from homophobia. A society that can't accept a butch girl or an effeminate boy essentially traumatizes the kid to the point where they want to seek sex change. Now, Tehran is the sex change capital of the Middle East, and they're the sex change capital of the Middle East because homosexuality is punishable by death. So if a man wants to be with a man, he first has to carry out a sex change operation. In America, what is happening is at a very early age, they're indoctrinating you, essentially brainwashing you and gaslighting you into you questioning your own existence.
Exactly.
And it is now getting to extra. This is child abuse. All child abuse is not physical, this is mental child abuse. Gaslighting a child like this, how is this any different than kids being brought up by Nazi regimes to believe that white people are superior, or communist kids being brought up to hate the capitalist and the Jew and the whatnot, whatever the hatred of the day is. So this is a very very common theme that you see across the board, where a lot of social, I won't, social misfits have a community, turnkey community created for them so that they can fit in. Now, the dangerous part of this is the genital mutilation that happens, which is irreversible.
Yes.
The belief that somehow, a mental inadequacy that you feel that other people do not feel. Yeah, sure. As an effeminate boy, I've been made fun of in school many times. Hey, tu chakka hai, hey, tu hijra hai, whatever. Okay. I did not feel the need to go in for a sex change operation. That does not mean everybody else does not. But imagine, what does it tell you about a scientific establishment that is willing to treat a mental trauma with genital mutilation? Irreversible genital mutilation, where the gender of the person and the ability to enjoy sexual gratification is completely destroyed for the rest of their life. They will have genitals, but those genitals will produce no pleasure whatsoever, and they certainly can't procreate. Not that procreation is the end goal, but assuming pleasure is the end goal, even that will not be there. So, it's we're going down this extremely dangerous dystopian path, which honestly, the very fact that we treat this somehow as a legitimate conversation worth having, instead of treating these people for what they are, which is cold, calculating exploiters and destroyers of people's lives, for me itself is very problematic. There needs to be severe penal action taken against them. Unfortunately, Ankit really hit the nail on the head. I can show you several people that have monetized this very, very successfully. There's this Godrej Equality Labs, Godrej Culture Labs,
Yeah.
supported entirely by the Godrej family, that is pushing this chap called Anish Gawande, who gets God knows what not scholarships and whatnot. He is the most toxic spreader of this nonsense. He actually came out, he subsidizes, he gaslights this Kashmiri LGBTQ activist to come out with a report saying, oh, no, before 370 went, the lot of LGBTQ in Kashmir was fantastic.
That's funny.
So 370, yeah.
Yes.
They actually get garbage like this. And the Godrejes, who actually get defense contracts and government contracts, are the ones sponsoring this kind of crap. Okay. So where do you go? The government itself is sponsoring people, giving contracts to people who do all this nonsense. A right-wing TV channel called Times Now is actually mainstreaming this schmuck who was coming and talking nonsense on TV, saying he does inter-party outreach. He does not do inter-party outreach. He only does Congress NCP outreach. He keeps calling Hindutvawadis fascists, criminals, Nazis who deserve to be gassed and jailed. He calls every Hindu a fascist, or rather, I don't know if it's a he, it's an it. It keeps calling everybody that it does not like as a fascist, which is, the thing. These days, anybody you don't like as a fascist is a bigot, is the misbegotten child of Hitler and Eva Braun,
But Abhijit,
etc., etc.
Abhijit, when these people, New Left doesn't allow, or the woke don't allow the other side to even present their views, then who is fascist? They are
So
theoretically, they have no right to speak out, right? That's the official position.
So therein lies the problem. Why hasn't the government actually created a counter narrative to this? I think the government is taking this threat very, very lightly. I think it says a lot that this government does not take the humanities seriously at all. They have allowed a complete drift. Technically, a first world narrative like wokeism should find no takers in India. And yet, because of the normative power of humanities influencing, they are getting a stranglehold on India. They are being allowed funding and things like that, which should have never been allowed.
That's why I talked about
Complete
NCRT
choking.
itself. NCRT itself being afflicted by this.
Absolutely. And you remember this organization called Pride Circle, which basically runs this basically a scam, which, claims to do inclusive hiring for companies. They will only get speakers who talk shit about the BJP, talk shit about Hinduism, talk shit about Hindus, talk crap about Hindu gods. And ministers and ambassadors will attend their conferences. which are sponsored by Stonewall UK and by Microsoft and Google and all these people. We can't do things by ourselves. Ultimately, the government really has to wake up. If the government is sleeping and snoring on this like Kumbhakarna, I mean, there's nothing. Ultimately, Kumbhakarna dies. Kumbhakarna dies. So if the government wants to behave like Kumbhakarna, congratulations to them. But understand, this is a growing threat. Unless you crush it now, it will become so big, it will essentially become the main form of external destabilization that happens in India. Because it won't stop here. It will then go on to critical caste theory, which has already happened. It has transitioned into caste. And the whole point of Hindutva, this is the truly strange thing. The whole point of Hindutva was to overcome caste differences so that you will be a Hindu first and a Brahmin or a Dalit second, or not at all.
True.
Which is why you have an OBC prime minister, you had a Dalit president, now you have a Adivasi president. But they will tell you this is all Brahminical. Modi, an OBC man is Brahminical patriarchy. An Adivasi president is Brahminical and female president is Brahminical patriarchy, not even Brahminical matriarchy.
True.
What do you do? And they are because of their because they can give you scholarships, they can give you funds, they can offer you like Ankit said, all these business class trips abroad and all of that. They get a lot of power, and the government seems completely oblivious to this.
Yes, really, that is the point where I began, that they have such public space and so much of bullying power that if, feminists are afraid to speak up, human rights people are afraid to speak up, and independent voices don't speak up. That exactly is the point. And with this kind
Sir,
of
आप देख लो, अगर इन्होंने जेके राउलिंग को कैंसिल करवा दिया है,
exactly,
what chance do any of us stand?
True. So see, what I started off with, that though all these teams look to be very different, and where Ankit tried to be speaking of one particular aspect of the entire issue of wokeism, of critical race theory, about queer movement, and about intersectionality. I see you find intersectionality of anti-Hindu forces, intersectionality of these people in Islam, which is totally anti-gender fluidity or sexuality, and you have issue of Christianity, all merged into one, along with the Marxism, which we have refused to identify, or we have not been able to identify. I've been saying since I came to see these things with a little more detail, I found this is the creeping danger, as Abhijit has rightly pointed out, one of the biggest dangers in coming time for the society, for the governance, and for the people itself, where they are trying to import ideas not at all identified with the Indian culture. And that is why I had this discussion. I hope this discussion can go far and wide, and we can have a much better understanding and much better discussions on this issue, so people understand what we are getting into by simply copying the West or trying to make some party happening by behaving in a certain way. Before I close, any other additional commenting Ankit or Abhijit wants to make?
I just wanted to say, sir, that as Abhijit rightly put, government really need to wake up from their sleep. They need to find synergies with the people, with the language people who understand. For an example, there are people like me, Gopi Shankar, Abhijit, and so on and so forth, who will never compromise on our national interest for all these conversations, right? They need to have synergies with people who are on their side, who will understand their language and make friends with the community instead of being against. Because what is happening is, if the government always have on paper against LGBT stand, we don't understand. But kid who is discovering themselves at the age of 16, 17, 18, when they come to community space, the first thing they are told is गवर्नमेंट खराब है, बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट खराब है, हिंदुइज्म खराब है, ये सब खराब है. अगर तुझे लग रहा है कि तू समलैंगिक है, then you have to agree with me whatever I say. Now just imagine this kid who is being rejected by the family, being bullied by the teachers, being bullied by their own friends, comes to only space which accepts him or her, is completely left dominated. For first 2 days, 3 days, he will be silent. And but from the fourth day onwards, he will also start believing in all these things, that yes, if all of these people are telling me ki government is wrong, Hinduism is wrong, Modi is kharab, India is bad country, and all of these things, we are oppressing Kashmiri people there and some other people here and there, all of this thing, they will also start believing in all that conversation. To counter that, there is very minuscule voices like mine and Abhijit and Gopi and people like us, or Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, and who have no support, neither from a global community, because we are not ready to talk shit on our country, so we don't have money, we don't have resources, we don't even have government support or anything, right? So we need to have the conversation with the people who understand our language of India first, of cultural identity first, and then start that movement. I think that is something which is missing, and that needs to be done by the civil society as well as by the government.
Yeah, as a simple question I asked to a Hyderabad University student, I said, you stand up in the crowd of LGBTQ activists and say, I am a gay. Next to me is an Islamist who is now in alliance with the left and the wokes. And there is also a person from the church. I am a gay. Now, what will your friend from Islamic community do? And what will a person following church will do to me? Very simple question. Answer will be very simple. But they are all in alliance. So what is the answer? We know the answer, right? But we don't raise the question. Yeah, Abhijit, your closing comments.
I have no closing comments, sir. Like, Marx, the great intellectual Marx said, last words are for fools who haven't said enough during their lifetime. I have no closing comments.
Thank you so much. I think I found this discussion very interesting, and I think more people need to talk more openly about these issues. The kind of sneaking, intolerance that is coming into society in the name of liberalism, and we all need to speak up and also look at the rights of the people who actually deserve these rights, actually deserve this support from the government. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Namaste.